Alrighty, how are we? Can you hear me just to make sure that we're all good? Perfect. Okay, so firstly, like usual, thanks call out. Thank you to my opponent as well. Looking forward to this because I think it should be a good debate. Okay, so to get this started, um, firstly, I want to talk about like education and what its aims are. I think we can both agree that to some extent, the aims of the education and as an institution is to produce a well-educated society and also to produce the skills necessary for people to be successful. I don't think I'm hoping that there are no contentions there because that kind of it is going to be hard. But so I would say that, and so I think it's worth clarifying that I also think that pedagogy and educational experience and educational theory is also very important to be successful. A successful teacher. I just do not think that to be a successful teacher, the most important thing is that pedagogical knowledge. And so for that, I would say that schools, when they look at the types of teachers that they're hiring, the types of people that they want to be working for them, I would say that they should be focusing on the teacher's knowledge of that content area that the teacher wants to teach rather than that pedagogical experience. Partly because that experience and that knowledge of educational theory also comes from the experiences that a teacher would have in whatever environment that they're teaching, and should they have not as good a grasp on the content knowledge that they want to teach, it means that experience is somewhat diminished, and then therefore the actual educational theory and pedagogy experience that they get is actually minimized. So in this, I'm going to be talking about three main things. Firstly, the harms of child-centered educational systems. And so what they are just having that focus on educational theory and pedagogy. Secondly, how this creates better experiences for teachers, and then tying in with that with my last point about how that creates better outcomes for teachers, or better outcomes for education overall, and how that creates better achieves the aims of the education system. So with that said, I'm going to pass on to you for like an opening, and then we can get into the actual substantive part of this.
All right, I'll just start off. You can hear me okay? All right. I agree with you about education. I think when it comes to education, there's one and only one relevant metric by which to measure a teacher's value, and that is the ability to transfer knowledge from one learner or onto a new learner. So it seems fairly clear in order for you to claim victory in this debate, you're going to have to demonstrate that subject area specialty leads to an increase in knowledge transfer and does so in a way that should motivate schools to prioritize subject area knowledge over knowledge of pedagogy and educational theory. At this point, I want to make sure we agree and understand what pedagogy is. I mean, it is the art and science of teaching. So if we can plug that into the main topic of our debate, a school should prioritize a teacher's knowledge of their subject area over their knowledge of the art and science of teaching and educational theory. I think that's going to be an important point that we're going to have to get to. So in order for you to do this, I think you're going to have to overcome three arguments. One is that in the area of subject matter knowledge, a superior or nuanced knowledge held by, say, the subject area expert will be unimportant when transferring foundational knowledge, and it will be the educators with the ability to teach that will make the difference when it comes to students. When it comes to transferring knowledge just to diverse learners, an individual's personal knowledge of the subject area makes little difference if they are unable to communicate that knowledge to a learner with a different background than their own. This obstacle, being able to communicate the knowledge, is reduced as an educator's mastery of teaching and educational theory improves. In today's schools, I would argue that single subject classrooms simply don't exist anymore. Every subject is blended with nearly every other in a way that encourages a cross-curricular mastery. An educator who has specialized content knowledge, even in one or two areas, is simply going to be outpaced by a teacher with a more general knowledge who has a mastery of teaching itself, being able to teach subjects to a diverse set of learners. That's my opening statement. I'm going to pass it back to you.
Okay, So I would say, actually, let me just get my head together. Okay, so in terms of that ability to transfer knowledge, and that kind of thing, or actually, before I get to that, I would agree that pedagogy is that art and science of teaching, um, and so yeah, I agree with that. In terms of subject knowledge, and whether it's important, more important to be able to transfer that knowledge at a basic foundational level, or having that specific content knowledge, I would say that given that your ability to actually transfer that knowledge comes from the experiences that you have in a classroom environment, I would say that that content knowledge is actually more important there. And the reason being is because I'm actually going to move some points up here. So how this creates better experiences for teachers if they have that specialized content knowledge, and then how does that transfer into that transfer of learning? So firstly, when teachers have that that content knowledge, they're able to actually try pass that knowledge more clearly. It means that they're more confident. It means that they can actually create better resources for the students should they need help, but also they can be a better resource in and of themselves. At the point in which you have a less specific knowledge of a certain topic and a more generalized area or a more generalized field, that means that if students need that extra help that that teacher doesn't know, they're going to have to rely on other methods. And this usually looks like things like the internet, textbooks, other resources that they may or may not have access to. And the reason why that's particularly harmful is because that doesn't actually teach them these things. And so the example I would draw you to is something like math. At the point in which a teacher has a less specific knowledge of math and how certain equations work and how the processes in mathematics work, if that student needs that extra help, they're unable to get it from the teacher, they're likely to look at things like the internet, which isn't actually going to teach them how to solve that issue, which then means that that transfer of learning doesn't actually happen as effectively, because firstly, they're getting it from an ineffective source, but secondly, they might end up with that answer, but it means that the process of getting to that answer, like that logical thinking, that reasoning, that looking at an issue and trying to solve it, isn't actually taught by the teacher. It's taught ineffectively by those resources that that student has to utilize, if the teacher cannot actually specifically teach that. And so while having that foundational knowledge is good and being able to transfer that knowledge being good, I would say that at the point in which teachers are not able to actually pass on that specific knowledge, if the students need that extra help, then that's actually a harm to the students.
All right. I'm going to start with your with the idea that a teacher's experience helps them to be able to communicate their knowledge to the students. Okay. It seems to me that an individual's personal experience will help them pass on knowledge to a specific type of learner, or a specific set of learners. But in a classroom, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the United States, you might have a teacher that is teaching 20 students, 25 students. Now, their experiences isn't going to translate to students that come from different backgrounds, that come from different, just different ethnic groups, different economic groups. They're just not going to be able to reach out if they lack the ability of, or not the ability, if they lack the knowledge of how to go around those obstacles that are inherent into just working with different people. Also, when we're talking about these students, we need to understand that in most cases, especially if you're talking about a teacher who has, bachelor's level education teaching in an elementary school or a middle school or a high school, you're not going to have instances where a student is going to need information or come to problems that are outside the average teacher's expertise inside a given subject. For instance, you're talking about the math class. You're not going to need a PhD in mathematics to teach a fifth grader basic algebra. Any teacher that is qualified to teach algebra is going to be able to pass that knowledge on. Now, a teacher who doesn't have the experience in the pedagogy is not going to be able to address all the needs of the students that she isn't able to share her experiences with, or who don't have a background in order to understand her experiences. Which leads, I think, to the opposite point, or what you were making, that they're going to have to use external sources. Every teacher is going to come to a point where they're not going to be able to communicate some particular subject to their students. Now, a teacher that has strong educational theory, strong pedagogy skills is going to be able to take any external source and modify it or explain it in a way that a student will understand, where someone who knows just a very specific style of teaching is going to be unable to take a different method and apply it as fluidly for the students. I'll pass it back to you.
Firstly, I would say that it seems like you misinterpreted my opening when I said that I still think that pedagogy is important, and I still think that that educational knowledge is still very important to teachers. It's just not the most important thing. And so I think that mischaracterization, I mean, I don't know if you actually think like this, but it kind of seemed like you thought that maybe I was saying that teachers won't have that pedagogical knowledge should they focus on content area. I don't know. I would say that that's not the case. But in terms of teachers having that specific type of education in a classroom setting, our classrooms work very similarly to the way that yours do, in the sense that you have one teacher teaching a somewhat large group of students, depending on what school you go to. And so I would say that given that happens quite a lot here in Australia, and also happens everywhere, that teacher is able to get that experience with those different backgrounds. But the reason why I would say that it's better on my side is because at the point in which you have a teacher that has a very generalized knowledge of any field or multiple groups of fields, it means that they're not able to specifically go into depth with the knowledge that they're trying to translate. And the reason why that's bad and creates worse experiences for the teachers is because and I don't know what it's like in America, but for us, the way to get into the educational system as a teacher is that you would get hired as a casual, and then you would basically teach wherever that school puts you because of your knowledge with pedagogy rather than content knowledge. So someone like myself who's studying physical education could end up very well teaching casually something like industrial arts or something like math, where I don't have that content knowledge, but because the school would see that I have that pedagogical knowledge, they would put me in an area where I'm very inexperienced. And the reason why that's bad is because at the point in which, firstly, I'm unable to actually teach the content away from the lesson plan. It also means that I'm not able to actually help the students because I don't have that knowledge. Students then see that, and at the point in which students see teachers who are unqualified or teachers who are not effective, then that makes the teacher's job harder for them because students pick up on that, they exploit that. So it means that they're going to do things, they're going to misbehave, they're going to make it hard for that teacher to be good. And at that point, when those classroom experiences are bad, then it means that that knowledge, that experience with pedagogy is actually worse because that teacher doesn't get that knowledge. On my side, when you have that content-based approach, teachers will only be teaching in those areas where they have that knowledge because it's not based on pedagogy. Schools won't be hiring teachers as casual unless they have an opening for whatever that content, that whatever content that teacher knows, which means that pedagogy is actually better for the teachers because they have better experiences in the classroom.
All right. So I think we're going to have to discuss the slight differences. Here in the United States, there's usually two paths in order to become a teacher in, primary and secondary schools. One, you can be a master of a certain subject area. Say you have advanced degrees in mathematics or biology or chemistry. You can then get a certification to teach. You can also specialize in teaching, as in specialize in teaching grades kindergarten through or preschool through, sixth grade, or sixth grade through 12th grade. So we have different paths that we can take. For the teachers that specialize in several different grades, and they get a general understanding, or they get a sufficient understanding of all the subject matter that they're going to teach for those grades. So from kindergarten to sixth grades, they are tested. We take practice tests and things here in the United States that test their content knowledge. They are not experts. They don't have advanced degrees in mathematics or any specific subject they may cover, but they do take courses that on how to educate students and how to overcome obstacles, where people with the advanced degrees lack that secondary training of how to overcome obstacles, and they do have to learn through experience. So for their first several years, or maybe their entire time they're teaching, they're going to hit the same struggles where they're unable to pass on certain knowledge because they're unable to communicate to a certain type of child, or a child with a certain set of experiences. So if we take into account where you said that they become a casual teacher, where they train you in the art of teaching, but not in your specialty, if we look at it like that, would not the experience of being a casual teacher, learning through the lesson plan, and then learning to be able to communicate to the students be more valuable than the additional knowledge that you would have, say, if you're teaching maths, if you're being able to teach the content that they're giving you, but being able to teach it to every student? I think that would be more important. Now, as you were saying, you may end up as in a field that you have no experience with. Is that something that happens very often? It seems like that wouldn't be a usual case for someone that lacks any expertise or ability and simply teaching straight from a lesson plan just because they're good at teaching for a particular grade level or student type.
Okay, so the thing I'll say to that is our paths to get to teachers are actually very, very similar. But secondly, in terms of that experience as a casual teacher, it actually happens more often than not that casual teachers literally just get put on a class and get told that they teach that class. And so very common here for PE teachers like myself to do that. Simply firstly because the market is oversaturated, but also because that focus on pedagogical knowledge means that we will do anything to get into that job. And then that means that we teach things that we are very inexperienced with. And like, I hate using anecdotes in debates, but I once had a teacher for math who was a PE teacher, but couldn't teach math at all. And so we literally just spent that whole lesson I don't even remember what we did because we did nothing, nothing beneficial, because that teacher did not have the knowledge that they were able to actually teach. And so I would say that that's actually a thing that happens a lot. But that experience that you get from following those lesson plans and things like that, that only works if the students cooperate with the teacher. And that's not to say that students are the perfect student that does everything that they're told to do, never speaks out of turn, never does things like that. But like I said before, at the point in which students see and feel like a teacher is ineffective at that job, then students will exploit that to the max. Students won't do anything that they're told to do. Students will make it incredibly hard for the teachers, because apparently it's fun to make casual teachers' jobs really hard. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a student at a school anymore, so I don't know why. But that's what students do. And so at the point in which you have teachers who are teaching subjects based on their pedagogical knowledge, not their content knowledge, and then you have students that pick up on that and utilize that to their advantage, that it means that those experiences just don't happen because the teacher is not able to get an effective classroom management to get that experience with, ensuring that students are doing their work, because the students are just never going to engage with that teacher on a meaningful level, which means that experience is only likely to happen if the students are like the perfect model students that we would very much like them to be, which we understand that they're not. And so at that point, I would say that means that it's actually harder to get that perfect experience for teachers to actually get that decent knowledge of pedagogy and get their head around it. But also, the way that students act is constantly changing. It's when I finish my uni degree, I'll have like a somewhat specific knowledge on pedagogy, but by the time I get into an actual school, like, that will have changed, because students change, the way that their attitudes change, their values change, and so you shouldn't be focusing on pedagogy at the point in which it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And so, like I said, while I think it's important, we should be.
All right. I think the two examples that you're giving concerning the student's behavior actually serve to help the argument that uh, a concentration on the pedagogy is going to be more beneficial, considering it is the art and science of teaching, which includes classroom management, which includes students' motivation. All of this comes as part of learning the pedagogy. So we can imagine a situation where a teacher with expertise in, say, a math class, it has poor classroom management skills. So in that situation, they're going to be equal to the teacher who has no expertise and just general knowledge in math, and how they're going to be able to transfer that mathematical knowledge. So even if they have it, if they can't control the classroom, if they can't organize the lessons correctly, if they can't motivate the students to learn, now all that part outside of the subject area mastery or subject area expertise, all that is part of the educational theory. That's going to be something that they're going to learn. It's going to be their experience that they have. So it seems to me that in the case of students not behaving correctly, not behaving as well for the teacher, having better classroom management skills, having a background on what to do in certain situations is going to be more beneficial than having a superior understanding in a specific subject. That's going to also fall to your second point, that students change in how they learn and they change over time. Part of your training that you get and part of the experience you get in learning to teach and learning how to teach allows you to adapt to the changing students, because students will change over time, but they also change based on their background. So you're going to have been in more situations or have learned about more situations that you're going to be able to apply to the changing students' learning, to the learning of the students as they change, as their needs change. You're going to be able to meet them more effectively. So I can imagine a situation where experts in a certain subject matter will not be able to impart that knowledge because of the same problems that non-experts would have. However, I can see where a non-expert that has a specialization in the art and science of teaching would be able to overcome those obstacles to learning.
Okay, I just want to clarify that I never said that teachers will be getting less pedagogy or less training in educational theory. I still think it's important to be a successful teacher. I still think it's very relevant. I just think that content knowledge is more important. Now, that does, and so that means that these teachers are still going to have the very same level of pedagogy that they have, that they already get now. Nothing's going to change there. What is going to change is that schools will be prioritizing whether or not a teacher is going to be more successful based on their knowledge of the content. And so these teachers, like I said, they're still going to have very high knowledge of pedagogy and educational theory. That's not going to change. So at that point, I would say that a lot of the material that you've been talking about now falls, because I still get those benefits you want to talk about having that experience in the classroom and having that. It just, yeah, I don't know. I still support pedagogy being taught teachers and having that experience. So not quite sure there. But anyway, the reason why I would say that this is also harmful specifically to the students is because at the point in which, or I would say that education needs to do two things. Firstly, it needs to, or to some extent, should be trying to instill this love of learning or love of education in students. Otherwise, what happens is students just disengage from school because they think that they're learning things that they have no interest in. They're learning things that they do not want to do. At the point in which you have teachers who have that specialized content knowledge, firstly, it means that they're able to talk about it better. But secondly, that also shows in the way that they present that knowledge to students. And so at the point in which teachers are more engaging, they're able to speak to the students on a like more, entertaining level, I guess you could maybe say. It means that students are more likely to actually engage with whatever it is that teacher's talking about, because when you have lower specific knowledge of a topic, then teachers are likely to refer to less engaging methods of teaching. And so that looks like things like putting things up on a PowerPoint and making the students copy notes from that PowerPoint. And so at that point, that transfer of learning firstly doesn't happen very well. But secondly, it means that the kids are not going to engage with their teachers. At the point in which you have that content-based approach, the teachers are likely to be better at expressing that knowledge, which then means that the students are more likely to engage with that knowledge. And it means that students are more likely to maybe want to take their education further into like tertiary education, things like that, but also means that they engage more with education because they care more. And so at the point in which you can have a teacher that can teach those things, but has that specialized knowledge and is more engaging to the students, then that's a benefit for the kids.
All right. I want to address your first objection. I understand the point that you're making about this teachers will still learn the pedagogy. I think we can both agree that the ideal situation is going to be a teacher with specialized subject area knowledge as well as training and experience in pedagogy, right? So that would be the ideal situation. I think that in a classroom where you had to, if you had to choose, and this is what we're talking about, schools choosing an instructor based on whether they can, based on their history. So I would say, now the way that I look at it, and correct me if this is wrong, I'll take a second to clarify. It seems like it is going to be either or. You're going to have a base knowledge that all teachers will have, like you said, and then you're going to have teachers who specialize in content area, and then teachers who specialize in educational theory. So if we're going to say that a teacher will have the same baseline, and then the one set of teachers just simply stop learning and go to teaching, where another one has the same baseline but then gets a specialized content area. Well, if they're going to be the same, and then one of them is going to have specialized content area, well, of course, the school is going to go for the one that has specialized content area. But it doesn't seem to be reasonable to assume that one teacher with specialized content area would have the same level of training in educational theory as a teacher who specializes in educational theory. So if you're going to have to make that distinction, whether or not you can have a teacher who knows how to teach or a teacher who knows the subject area, I think schools have to pick the teacher who is better at teaching because of the diverse situations that they're going to encounter throughout their career. A school's classroom is going to change. They may not have needs for certain subject areas. Their needs for their students change. So when you hire a teacher, you can't hire a teacher to only teach one type of class for their entire career. So it seems to me, if you're going to talk about specialized knowledge, then if you have specialized content area knowledge or specialized educational theory knowledge, the school is going to have to go with the educational theorist just because of the unexpected circumstances that might come up. I just want to make sure I want to make sure that I understand that you're saying that they're going to each have a baseline, but if one's going to specialize in content area, then the other one will specialize in educational theory.
Okay, so I would say that out of all of what you just talked about, especially with that choice as to whether or not schools should be choosing someone who has that specialized educational theory knowledge or that specialized content knowledge, and which one has more, I would actually say that the person with that specialized content knowledge probably has more educational theory for a number of reasons. Firstly, because if you take the first path, and I don't know how teaching degrees work in America, but in Australia, your Masters of Teaching is actually part of the degree that you do. And so what that is to say that when I go to study physical education, as I have been for the last few years, not only do I do the content, but I also do the educational theory at the same time. And so at that point, you actually get more because you spend longer on doing both of those things. But even if you take the other hand, where you have either people who specifically focus in one or specifically focus in the other, what happens is you get your PhD in, say, math, and then you spend the next 2 years after that getting your Masters of Teaching. that means that after you've got that specialized content knowledge, you get that 2 years of educational theory. After that, you have 2 years to study only educational theory, which means that that specialized content teacher still has an incredibly firm grasp on educational theory. And then if you, and so I would say that in both instances, always you could still go for the person with the better grasp of content knowledge because they still have that incredible understanding of educational theory as well. Because I don't think it's fair to say that teachers, I think the only teachers that I know of that have really good educational theory knowledge but not so good content knowledge is primary school teachers. I think you have primary schools in America. I don't know. Um, I would say that they're the only people who need them, but at that point, primary school kids don't need that specific content knowledge because you obviously can't overload kids with certain things. But once they get to high school, which is our equivalent of like your elementary and middle school and high school, I think, I don't know. When you get to that higher levels of education where you need that specific knowledge, the ability to teach that knowledge comes hand in hand with that content knowledge. And if you can't, and so while it's important to be able to teach, you still need to be able to have that content knowledge. And so I would say that when schools are choosing their teachers, those high content knowledge teachers still already have that high knowledge of educational theory, whereas on the other hand, you don't get high specific educational theory teachers that have good content knowledge. You can't have both of them in one on your side, whereas on my side, I do.
Okay. So I want you to correct me then if we're wrong, but it seems like we both agree that in our younger, we call it preschool and elementary. That would be our kindergarten or first through, say, fifth grades. We can agree that a generalized teacher with a more experience in educational theory would be the preference for instead of a specialized content area. Is that something that you agree with for the first, say, through the we can go through, we have a fifth grade that separates our elementary from our middle school here. So then, that being the case, you're saying that as the teacher or as the students progress through their high school, their I guess their particular education becomes more specialized in Australia. Now here, we continue to have a general education courses where we may have one or two classes, advanced classes, say, we call them advanced placement classes for calculus or for biology, where I could see having a teacher with specialized knowledge would be beneficial for those students that are interested. But the majority of our students do not pursue those. They pursue our general graduation requirements, so you don't ever get to the point where specialized knowledge through our high schools would make a significant difference. And I think definitely not as significant of a difference as it may seem that it should. So here it would seem that unless they're hiring for a very specific class, say they're teaching engineering or they're teaching biology or they're teaching chemistry to advanced placement chemistry, advanced placement biology, that would maybe require a specialized education. But other than that, the level at which the teachers will be teaching the students will never come to a point where any particular expertise it would make that big of a difference, which then would leave the schools to have to fall back on, again, what they're going to be able to do if their needs change. If you can take a teacher who's been teaching biology but who is a good teacher and understands educational theory, and you can move them to a chemistry class if you have need for a second chemistry class, or you can move them to like you said in your class, teaching a maths class, because they have that general knowledge and they have the ability to teach. They're going to be able to be successful in any field that they're in, whether they have that specialized knowledge. So it seems that up into the case of those very few classes here in the United States.
Okay, so I would say that keeping primary school out of the debate because, that's not, the kids just simply cannot handle having that specific depth of knowledge. So going into, say from sixth grade up, because I know that, we differentiate from you there. I would say that this specific knowledge is important, but also our schooling system must be very, very different to yours because all of our classes at high school are subject specific. So you don't have those generalized classes about, like general requirements to graduate or for us to get your school certificate or whatever. Like all of our classes are very specific in what they teach. And so I would say that knowledge is far more important because and so I would draw you back to the things that we talked about earlier, in specific rebuttal to you saying that you can take like a biology teacher who has that educational theory and put them into like a chemistry class or a math class, and they'll be able to teach that. Firstly, I would say that that's kind of a little bit different because biology has some relevance to chemistry and math, so like having that inter-subject knowledge is always good. But when it comes to like that very different those two very different subjects, so say a biology teacher having to teach English or not English because English is compulsory, a biology teacher having to teach visual arts, say, because they don't have that content knowledge, they won't actually be successful. And so this goes back into what I was talking about earlier when I was saying about what kids do when they see that teachers are not effective in their job. So it's fine that teacher has that educational theory knowledge, but when you put them into an environment that they don't know very well or that they're very inexperienced at, kids will see that, which means that experience is actually not going to count for anything because it's not very good. And so that only works, that point only works if that environment is somewhat conducive to getting some experience. And sometimes it is, but the majority of times it's not, because the kids literally will not do anything that teacher wants them to do. So that educational theory then becomes useless because that teacher will never be able to control that class, which means that they're not actually going to get that experience from teaching something that they're very unqualified.
All right. So to close out, I'm going to just address your last point. I think, again, this is going to be something I feel that demonstrates where educational theory is, if a school is having to decide which teacher to pick, if there, or what preference they're going to have, if they have experienced or expect to experience drastic changes where they're going to have to move teachers from one specialty to another, say in your example, say from a math or biology or chemistry teacher into a visual arts, if they know that is a possibility, then it seems to me that their only option is going to take teachers who have advanced knowledge in educational theory and pedagogy, so that they're able to take those new environments, take the information that they're given in their lesson plans that they don't have experience with, review that, and then know how to pass that information on. Even the limited information that they understand is going to be better than the students having no teacher at all, or a teacher that lacks that ability or doesn't have if they have more educational theory, then they're going to do a better job than a teacher with less educational theory. So if they anticipate those changes coming, that seems like their only option would be to be prejudiced towards those with educational theory in their hiring practices. So again, I think the art and science of teaching is something that's unique to teachers and is different from content specialty. And as you said, every teacher gets some training, and to become qualified to be a teacher, they're going to learn about that. But those that make learning how to teach their specialty, that are able to engage with more students with more diverse backgrounds, they're just going to be able to have better success. And as I said in the beginning, the only real value that a teacher has is how well that they can transfer knowledge. So a teacher that is better able to transfer knowledge to the most students is going to be the one that the school should prioritize when hiring, and I believe that is going to be the one with higher degrees of educational theory. I want to thank you for the debate. I enjoyed it. And hello from the past. And let me know how it is in the future and if I need to, buy stocks or anything that's coming up. Okay. Again, thank you so much.